Hey everybody, Pete Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. Today's guest is a longtime friend of mine, someone whose show I helped produce. His name's Jon Krotec. His show is called Straight Outta Combat Radio. It's on the Heroes Media Group and part of the Green Zone Hero collection of shows. He's also got a show called Task Force Zen, which focuses on healing and ways to be mindful and all those kind of things. It's a collection of shows I think you're all worth checking out. So you have Task Force Zen and Straight Outta Combat Radio. The thing that Jon has done and why he's on the show today, one, he's my friend, but two, he's written a book that went instant 4-category bestseller on Amazon. It's a poetry book, and it talks about, the poems are about his time of sexual trauma that he experienced as a kid, and that transition from normal happy kid to a kid that had been sexually abused and what it's done to his life ever since. It's a powerful collection of poems, and you're going to get a chance to hear us talking about how he has spent his life battling this demon and finally seems to have come to terms with it now that he's 60 years old, basically. And so I think you'll appreciate this. Two good friends, two veterans talking about life and what it means to reinvent, rediscover, and rehabilitate from the trauma that we all suffer. Hey, if you're into supporting the show, which I hopefully you are, and if you're new to the show, hey, welcome. 5 episodes a week, and really oftentimes we're doing more than that, but 5 episodes a week. It'd be great if you share the show or tell a friend about the show or share a link, whatever it is. When we put something out there, if you comment on it or share it, that's like money in the bank to us, because you know, we fight 700,000 other shows, a lot of big shows. And so, you know, the ones that get shared and have activity, they stand out. They get pushed ahead of others in the line. So anytime you can support us, we appreciate that. And we appreciate you no matter what. And listen, whether you're in Brazil or Israel or Russia, hey, Spain we have a big audience in Spain. How about that? We love it. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but it's not very good. Anyhow, a lot of folks, a lot of countries, over 80 countries, and hopefully we'll be over 90 here by the end of the year, but over 80 countries listen to the Break It Down show. Think about that. Wow. Anyhow, let's get on with the show here. Jon Krotec and I are going to get it in, talk about some poetry. Save the Brave, savethebrave.org.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hello, this is Jon Krotec, and you're listening to the Break It Down show with Pete Turner.
One of my favorite people, Jon and I talk, gosh, I mean, sometimes it's not for a week or two, but we talk all the time, constantly about podcast business, life, and just in general, like getting better. He's got a podcast called Task Force Zen that focuses on changing the paradigm around healing and, you know, things like meditation, that kind of thing. But also, he's got Green Zone Hero overall organization, and within that, Straight Outta Combat Radio, which is his podcast. So there's a couple things there. There's Task Force Zen, Straight Outta Combat Radio. Those are podcasts. And then there's the Green Zone Hero. It's basically a list for businesses that support veterans. They're able to sign up. So if you're a business and you got to support veterans, you sign up for this, and it validates to others that, hey, this company actually supports veterans. So, Jon, first off, thanks for coming on the show. And I'm looking forward to the big talk about the book.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. You know, we have been talking behind the scenes for several years now, and, you know, you have been helping me with all the editing on all my shows, and we've talked from everything from editing podcast shows to politics to life in general, healing, and all kinds of neat things. So I'm very pleased to be here and to support your efforts with what you're doing, Pete.
Oh, man, that's great. So give us a real quick rundown. I mean, I introduced Task Force Zen, but let's just really quick talk about that so folks who are into that kind of thing can click over on wherever they listen to podcasts and give that a sample.
Well, Task Force Zen is a newly released podcast show. I think we've got 14 episodes, and it is a holistic healing without labels. We talk to people that are actually making a difference in the world. And when it comes to all those different modalities that can heal people primarily from the traumas in their life. And we're having a blast with it. You mentioned Straight Outta Combat. We're at 124 episodes of Straight Outta Combat, where we're trying to diminish the negative stereotype of veterans, and especially combat veterans. We've had a blast doing that, from General Flynn to Governor Ron DeSantis a lot of great guests, Rocky Blyer. And then Green Zone Hero we're entering our 5th year. We're a online business directory of companies that support freedom by recognizing veterans, active duty personnel, and their families. And then, I've got my What's Your Apocalypse website, healing, helping people through their traumas, primarily sexual assault and traumatic brain injuries. And then the newly released book last month of Fractals, which went bestseller not only in 1 category, but in 4. So,
Wow.
Yeah, so we're having, you mentioned earlier behind the scenes, I wish there were 2 or 3 Petes. Well, I'm kind of in the same boat, brother. A lot of us are like that are hard chargers. We wish that there were more of us so we could be our own force multiplier, if you will.
Yeah, force multipliers. It's such a big thing. Let's get back into. I want to explore Task Force Zen a little bit because I don't know how much you've talked about it publicly, but it's such a cool show, and like you're on top of the iceberg with like just breaking into this thing. There's so much content there and so much healing to be had. Talk a little more in depth about like why you created it and what your goal is for it.
Well, Task Force Zen is a holistic healing podcast initiative. It's healing without labels. So often when people are traumatized by something in their lives, they're labeled. And a lot of times those labels, Pete, as you know, they keep people at bay from wanting to get the help. We've interviewed people like Dr. Rick Straussman, who is in the world of DMT and psychedelics, and Dr. Joe Torpor with ayahuasca and a lot of neat people that are just doing things to help people through their traumas. The Task Force Zen it's kind of a paradox because the task force, we think of a military operation, which is anything but holistic healing. And then Zen, which is a balancing act, if you will. So we're Task Force Zen. We're a global mission to create more education for holistic healing. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're right in the middle of this global pandemic and people are looking for answers. And, a lot of times they're right here inside of us. There are some phenomenal human beings. My gosh, I think you've interviewed 1,000 different people, all really killer guests that are all doing interesting things. And by getting these stories out there, we add to that human condition of storytelling.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing that. It's there are a lot of podcasts in this space, but you don't know if it resonates with the person who finds it until they do. Like that resonance has to happen so that someone can latch on and get the help they need. It's great if this person or that person, but it doesn't mean it works for everybody else. So there's tons of room in this space, and there are so many people working on this. It's one of the areas of health and wellness that's really exponentially exploding right now with how we treat things. You talked about things like psychedelics, using different hemp-based products for therapy, things like surf therapy, equine therapy. I mean, this was impossible a quarter century ago, back when we were young fellas. But now look where we're at. And then just because we've got access to all these different things in an array, there's all this other evidence and support to what's happening, and it's just enriching it. So thanks for exploring it. And I wanted to take some time to talk about it because it is such a powerful space that you're operating in.
Well, thanks, Pete. And you're right. There are a lot of people out there, the sky is the limit. The world is our oyster, all these things. For me personally, I was assaulted as a young boy between the 3rd and 4th grade. And of course, boys don't talk about, and even younger girls don't talk about things like that. And so the social stigma that goes along with childhood assault kept me in the dark for a long, long time. It was 42 years later that I was involved in an alcohol-fueled traffic accident where I received the gift of a traumatic brain injury. And my life spun out of control. Within short order, it forced the sale of my business. I was involved in a divorce with my wife. I made the call to that suicide crisis hotline, and probably the worst time in my life at the age of 55 years old. So I got the help that I needed, the proverbial or the usual routes to help heal insomnia, which was, antidepressants basically made things worse. So what I ended up doing was going out and I looked for something different, where I found CBDs and hemp that you mentioned. And then what that journey did, well, first of all, it saved my marriage. It saved my life. I'm on a trajectory now with all kinds of neat projects that are just there to help people and businesses. And what I found out was there's, 40 or 50 or 60 modalities, healing modalities that have been around forever. And a lot of people don't know about them. You mentioned equine and canine and, psychedelics. Who would have ever thought that a guy like me would ever consider stuff like that? And especially CBDs. My hair's cut short. I wear a suit normally. And amazingly, I'm an advocate for all those kinds of things because everybody's different. Pills may not work for people. They didn't work for me, but what did work was CBDs and a really tight network of people that dedicated their lives to helping people like me through trauma. So the only thing I can do as a human being is give back. And that's what I'm attempting to do with all the things we're involved in.
What other projects are out there then? I mean, I know you're a busy guy. You and I are always talking about the myriad things that we're working on. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I like What's Your Apocalypse? I'm working on some speaker presentations that are just, people think I'm nuts, but I dress up post-apocalyptic from a mask and a respirator. We've heard a lot about respirators, but when I was raped, that's how I felt. I felt like I was in the middle of an apocalypse. So these speaker presentations, I call it trauma drama. I take off articles of my costume, if you will. They all represent a bad behavior or a negative belief. And then I strip it down to the human body. I'm not naked. I'm wearing a bodysuit. And then I get all dressed up again like you and me look like right now.
Right.
And the shirt can be yoga. The belt can be your friends. Your weightlifting could be your shoes. And we're just normal people. So What's Your Apocalypse? And then the Fractals book, I got a copy right here for anybody that can see that. That's me in the 3rd grade. And then this is me in the 4th grade. And you see a boy inquisitive. And then you see a boy not inquisitive. And I started creatively writing back in junior high school as a way to get through the horror of being abused like that. And so what I found out is that I had all these fractured pieces of my life, and I tried to make sense out of what happened through poetry. I've got over 5,000 poems. One of my really near and dear friends, Reliance Spofford, who works with creative content, connects. She said, John, why aren't you putting this out there? Why don't you write some of your poems and help people? I'd never even considered it because it was always a personal thing for me. And lo and behold, I got a hold of Kim Richardson out in Arizona, Kim Richardson Publishing. She helped me through the whole process. And I got to tell you, Pete, I was blown away by the response. I had 1,800 downloads in one day. The book became an international bestseller in poetry, like right out of the chute. And then it was #1 bestseller in depression, #1 bestseller in sexual abuse, and then in emotional healing. So I was just completely blown away by that. And the mission with the book is to let people out there who may be suffering with something similar to know that they're not alone and that they can overcome it. If I can connect with one person with one poem and they feel alive and better and can move forward, then I know we've accomplished our mission. And then the AHO Radio, which is something that I know you're going to be helping me on very soon, which is the Authentic Human Outlier radio network. We just recently launched that on YouTube. Bill Protzman, a West Coast guy like you, who's down in San Diego, he does Music Care Incorporated. He's been working with veterans and people who've been suffering through music and music therapy. And so with Authentic Human Outliers, there's an interview show that we were going to be very similar to Task Force Zen, but we're going to talk to people that are outliers, that operate outside the status quo. And I think we've got 4 or 5 episodes of that, and it's going pretty well so far.
That's cool. Let's go back into the book. What first off, what kind of are you crazy? Let's answer that right now. What kind of kook releases a poetry book and then all of a sudden finds out that it's a bestseller in 4 categories, including international? That's just, man, that's fantastic that happened for you.
Well, completely humbled by that, and I got to say, I surrounded myself with the right people. I had a launch team of some I think you're on my launch team, as a matter of fact. And thank you for that. But I had a launch team of people that know me personally and were able to help me with the push of the book. Kim Richardson is phenomenal. If you're out there and you have a book, a manuscript or something you want to have published, get in touch with Kim. But I surrounded myself with the right people. And then it just blew up. And, Pete, we've talked about this. So often I've surrounded myself with the wrong people.
Yeah.
And, or people that didn't align with the core value sets. And, I could never figure out why I always was left holding the bag. It's, the deal.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot. I just turned 60, and I don't feel 60. I really feel like I've got another lease on life, because I got to tell you, man, I was almost not here. I made that call, and that's a true story. They literally, you hear the story, they talked me off the ledge. They literally talked me off the ledge. And they said, we can't save your marriage, but we can save you. And you have to want to do it.
Yeah.
And it was painful. I'm still a work in progress. I had to learn how to put thoughts to words and be able to voice it again. And then I had to win my wife back. That was the toughest thing. It makes the Army and stuff we did there like duck soup. Winning back my wife was huge, and it took really hard work. And a really good friend of mine told me, she said, John, she looked at me, she says, love wins all the time. Prove to your wife that you love her. And I went to work, and it took me almost a year. And the week before Thanksgiving, 2016, I was all by myself. My wife and I were separated at the time, and she sent me a card. And the card said something like, I've called my attorney this morning, and I've called off our divorce. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I fell to my knees, and it was the happiest moment of my life. And I got to tell you, man, any relationship that you're in takes work, and God made me prove that. And I'm just glad it worked out.
Yeah. And I am too, man, because you're a good dude, and I appreciate how much energy you put into other people. How the heck do you maintain all of this outreach to help others and yet still, put food on the table and everything else? I mean, I know that your book has done well, but I'm assuming that the book has not made you rich, because usually a first book never does. But how do you get by day to day?
There's a good question, man. Thanks. There's leadership belief systems that are out there, and I'm one of the students of those. And most leaders who have become very successful have not been motivated by money. And my motivation is to help others. I know that many of your listeners have heard of the law of attraction. I always thought it was kind of BS, and then I started living it. I started believing. My real mission is to really connect with people at a deeper level than just money, because if it's just all about money, people can make money. You can make money, but can you really build solid relationships? So I think that from here on out, I know that all of my relationships are going to be based on building solid foundation. Now, what blew me away with Green Zone Hero, we didn't even have a brand, and Harley Davidson bought into us. Boar's Head Provisions bought into us. Mission Barbecue bought into us. Sam Ash Music Stores, Community AIDS Network. A lot of big companies bought into us. And then the smaller companies did too. Here's a business directory of companies that support freedom. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that you're probably already doing one of the things that we ask, are you hiring veterans? Are you veteran owned? Do you give to veteran causes? Do you give special prices to veterans? 97% of the companies in America do that. We've even got members from Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia now, because they see what we're trying to do with the business directory. It's a grassroots movement, a B2B business. We give tools and exposure to people and companies and decision makers and visionaries that not only talk the talk, they walk the walk. And they have publicly raised their hands and joined as a Green Zone Hero. A green zone is a safe place, or a relatively safe place in a combat zone. You know about that. But a Green Zone Hero is a person or an organization or a business that publicly supports freedom. And we think those companies need to be exposed, and in a good way. So that's what we're doing with Green Zone Hero. A new website will be launched here shortly. The one we've had has been very unuser friendly, but now we're going to go to a more geocached and more user friendly. And we're starting, in fact, all the way until July 4th, we have free complimentary memberships for a year to anybody that's interested in joining the network. And we also, anybody that's a paid member, when their subscription runs out, we're going to give them an extra year on top of that. So it's our way of giving back during this pandemic. You know, the businesses are suffering, people are suffering. It's my little bit, our little bit that we can do to help give back. And, you know, it's free. If you have any issues, you know, we'll figure them out for you. But, you know, go to greenzonehero.com, go through the process. Don't worry about the email that says you need to pay. Don't do anything. You'll be in the system, and then I'll go back on the back end and have our people make you go live.
Yeah, let me just take a moment and just say again what you just said. This is a subscription-based support directory for that highlights your company's support of whatever it is, veterans in this case, right? That's what you guys do specifically. So, you know, I've got friends that work for companies that are doing this already, like my friend Mark from Interstate Batteries. You know, there's no reason why Interstate Batteries wouldn't take a free subscription to this. And so I just encourage anybody who's got a business and supports veterans, which is basically everybody, whether you're in the U.S. or abroad, and just go to greenzonehero.com, fill out the thing, and it's free. It's free.
It's free.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Thanks, Pete, for pointing that out. And you know what? And you're right. If you're a business owner or a decision maker or somebody that's in management, and your business gives special pricing to veterans, or you hire veterans, or you hire disabled veterans, or you give to veteran causes, then join us. You know, just go online, like Pete just said, go to greenzonehero.com and join us, and then we'll take care of the rest. And then anybody that's a current subscription, you know, if they hear this broadcast, we're going to give you another year.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's all good stuff. You know, it's called good business. It's brand marketing. It's cause marketing. It's just more exposure, and businesses need exposure. Why not be recognized for something good rather than be recognized or not recognized? Because there was a survey back a few years ago. One reason why we even did the website, Pete, and they interviewed 500,000 people, veterans and non-veterans, men and women. And what they found out was that 97% of customer base will patronize a business that publicly supports veterans. That's huge. That's not 60 or 70 or 80 or 90. It's nearly 100%.
Wow.
But the one that got me as a small business owner was 42% of those who were surveyed said they would either reduce their spending or not spend at all unless you did support veterans. So it's a great way to flex some muscle and to get exposure and to show the world what your business does. You know, when Harley Davidson joined us, I got to tell you, Pete, the guy that called my partner when they were doing the money transaction, he said, stand up and pat yourself on the back. My partner thought he was nuts. And the guy, you know, why? Because Harley Davidson does not support companies that don't really have an established brand yet. Consider yourself very fortunate. Now, Harley Davidson's been around 115 plus years. They're part of American history. They're a multi-billion-dollar global manufacturer of motorcycles, freedom of the open road. When they joined our network, and in 78, in fact, I think you interviewed one of our Grizzly Harley Davidson, 78 Harley Davidson dealerships in numerous states joined us, didn't even hesitate. And that speaks volumes, you know, that they understand how important it is to recognize and support freedom in our veterans. It's a no-brainer.
Well, especially for Harley, because it is a brand that is linked to America specifically. Like, is there a more American brand than that? You know, like, you can't be more linked to what it means to be an American. Like, there's just no way. And then also, when you think about veterans who are, you know, post-combat, all the way out of that stuff, I mean, Harley Davidson, and that is an image that comes up. It's so on the money for that. So I'm glad that partnership does exist. Every time I've been to a Harley Davidson dealership, there's a veteran there. I mean, literally every single time. So I love it.
It's phenomenal, man. Whenever we visit the ones that have joined Green Zone, these people are just amazing business owners. And you're right, veterans are always in and around there. You know, Adamak Harley Davidson in Jacksonville, a huge Navy and Air Force, or there's some Navy and Marines up there. But you know, anywhere you go, there's a Harley Davidson dealership near a base. And we've got them in Southern California. I think we got half a dozen out there in your neck of the woods. But you're right, though. You know, Harley Davidson, they're Green Zone Hero members. They support us. I was at their corporate headquarters 2 years ago. They support Straight Outta Combat Radio. They're a phenomenal company, despite, having to make some business decisions that people didn't necessarily like.
I want to get back into Fractals in a minute, but let's first venture off a little bit and let's talk about some of your work at the national level with veterans. You're constantly engaged, going to conferences, talking to these folks. What do you see from a positive angle in the veteran marketplace? I mean, there's, Black Rifle Coffees, a lot of brands out there that do these things. What's your sense of the marketplace for veterans and the support of that environment?
Well, it's still strong. It continues to grow. You've got amazing businesses and business owners who are veterans. I think that the task at times has gotten weary because, the marketplace became saturated. Some organizations and people may not have been doing the things that they said they were going to do. And I think the non-veteran customers may have gotten a little bit tired of the messaging. Oh, it's another veteran this. Oh, it's another veteran that. And I think that's going to happen. That's the ebb and flow of business. Sure. and perception. But I think it's relatively strong. Veterans are amazing people, and they're people just like them, the non-veterans. They just have a different experience in life. But, a veteran who would come into your business and work for you would be just a phenomenal employee or manager. People that own veteran-owned companies are sometimes they're they're doing their thing. They're taking their skill sets from the military and they're making it happen. Black Rifle Coffee is a company that started a few years back and amazing success. They continue to push forward and do great things. But I think the marketplace is still strong. I think most Americans, if not all or nearly all, support veterans. The veteran support, it runs deep in our history. It's always been something, with the exception of maybe the Vietnam War, which is a political, that was a hellstorm. But I think that most Americans love those who wear the uniform, and not just military, but all those first responders and law enforcement, fire department. And we even see now with this COVID-19 pandemic, how important it is that we have those people in uniform. A person that you and I both know, Navy Commander Jeanette Arancibia, who works in global health initiatives, got deployed right before this stuff went down with COVID-19. And we've been in contact behind the scenes. The United States Navy and our armed forces around the world are doing really, really, really hard work to help with the situation. And I'm looking forward to when she comes back home. But I guess that's a roundabout question, or a lot of information for your question, but it's still strong. We still just need to continue our networking, and we need to continue to show the rest of the world that veterans aren't broken.
You've got, what you said, 14 or so episodes of Task Force Zen. You've got well over 100 episodes of Straight Outta Combat Radio.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
You've got, what you said, 14 or so episodes of Task Force Zen. You've got well over 100 episodes of Straight Outta Combat Radio. What have you learned along the way?
Wow, that's a great question, Pete. So you've done this before, man. Yeah, just a few times. What I've learned along the way, it's been therapeutic for me as well. And what I've learned is there are some phenomenal human beings out there. And until you start talking to somebody like we are right now, you really can't judge a book by its cover. The stories, like when we interviewed General Flynn, all the stuff that he was catching in the media and, off the record, his conversation about family and about America and about sense of duty, there's no way in heck that guy compromised the U.S. And right. So I've learned that people are people. We're all trying to get through this, and people that have worn the uniform, it's a special person to raise the palm, the right hand, and swear an oath to the U.S. Constitution that you will defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's a special person. Doesn't mean that we're any better.
Yeah.
it's just a special person. You know, those people that I've interviewed on Straight Outta Combat Radio, you know, Bobby Henline, whose buddies were killed in an IED explosion, and Bobby gets horrifically burned. It may have hurt him on the outside, but on the inside, that guy's heart is huge, and he turned it into comedy. And Rocky Blyer, who had his foot blown off in Vietnam and comes back and earns 4 Super Bowl rings.
Wow.
And the list goes on. You know, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who was a JAG Navy officer, you know, at Guantanamo, you know, and served in Iraq. You know, these are the best of the best. Ryan Weaver, Professional Bull Rider Association, rocker, Black Hawk helicopter pilot, double Gold Star, lost his brother and brother-in-law in combat, helicopter pilots. You know, Kaylin, you know, Marie, you know, Navy public relations officer who saw the real news. You know, all kinds of interesting people that have just motivated me and inspired me and made me want to do better. The list goes on. And what I've learned is we live in a great country with a lot of great people. And I never take anything for granted anymore. And when I'm feeling down, I just think of some of the people I've interviewed and I'm like, holy cow, what have I got to be down about?
Yeah.
Just saying, man.
Yeah. I've had 3 different people who are dead, you know, on my show, and they're still alive. You know, I had this guy, Jason Schechterly, has 5th degree burns, burned his entire body. He was supposed to be, you don't survive 5th degree burns. And that guy is the sweetest guy ever. He is so motivating. You know, Josh Montz, Mike Day, these are all people that have been through, they're not supposed to be alive. They have all died. And yet here they are still living the life. And, you know, when you think you've had a hard day, not as hard as Jason, he got burned alive inside of his car.
Yeah. You know, those stories just rock your soul. I got to tell you, Pete, now we're sharing a couple of episodes. My most popular episode was the one that you really crafted really nicely, was Joey Korn, the son of a Holocaust survivor who made it to America after the war. This man, first day of the war in 1939, lost everything. Never saw his parents again, never saw his siblings again, traveled through 5 concentration camps, which liberated by the Americans at, I can't remember, Birken, I can't pronounce it, but, you know, was liberated by the Americans, married a German woman, made it to the United States, came in through New Orleans, made it to Georgia, had a family business, very successful, never talked about his experience. And they found his manuscript right after he died. And then everybody knew what he had been through. And he absolutely loved America. He couldn't say enough about the American fighting forces that liberated that concentration camp. So you're right, man. When we hear, and Josh flatlined and bled out on the battlefield and survived. And now he's helping other people to survive too. You know, Darker Side of the Soul, I think, is his book. And again, amazing people. And you've interviewed some really, really good ones, man.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate you. Yeah, Josh Montz was dead for 15 minutes. Dead. Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So when you
yeah, I think his senior NCO was shot with a sniper round, killed his senior NCO, and then cut one of his arteries.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Went through 2 of them. Yeah, it's just
Crazy
an incredible story. But yeah, you're bringing up some of the things that, you know, especially with the COVID thing, we seem to be under a lot more stress, and, you know, that's understandable and everything. But you get around, you talk to a lot of people, you interview a lot of people. Would you say that in general, you know, through your experience, because I mean, it's not just veterans you're talking to these healers too. What do these folks see in America? Are they positive for its future? Because there's a whole lot of people that are glad to be negative, but folks who get out, who don't just encounter the same people, what's your sense for how do they assess the world?
That's a great question too, Pete. You know, a couple of things. The media, don't want to go into the media, but the media is not always positive, and there's kind of an agenda there. What these people are saying is that we have an incredible opportunity to perhaps think about our lives differently in the way we do business. Without getting into anything political, but, for a long, long time now, we have been engaged in business practices that may not have always been the best for the global economy. It may have been the best for some people at a different level, but for people in general, I think what COVID-19 has done has exposed some weaknesses in that practice of globalism. And so what we're hearing is, whether or not people will wake up, that's entirely up to each individual. But what these healers are believing and seeing is that this is like a huge punch in the gut. It's a major reset button, not necessarily maybe as a global society, but for the individual to really look inside and find out what's truly important. And I got to tell you, Pete, my wife and I were talking about it today. We walk 1.5 miles every morning with our dog. Dogs are great, by the way. And we talked about how our lives are going to change. What this has made us realize is that a lot of the things that we thought, quote unquote, that we needed to be happy, to be whole, is not necessarily true. What's really important now is the networks that we can build, the solid networks built on things like integrity, honesty, compassion, patience. Remember 9/11, right after 9/11, the world in America was hunky-dory. We were all Americans. We were all pulling together. This is a time when the world needs to pull together. And the fear has been said, well, it might change things for a while. And how long will it take humans to get back to business as usual? I would like to think that business as usual will change, and that perhaps this will be a good incentive for us to do things differently than the way we've been doing them over the last 30 or 40 years. I have great hope in the American spirit and great hope in the spirit of other people outside of America to want to do things on a different basis. My faith is in God, and, a lot of these things that are happening are way beyond my pay grade. So my hope is that we can build these networks like you're doing with your show of rock solid individuals who really are committed to business and commerce, but also to educating others about different ways of doing things. Doesn't have to be always the same way. I'm a college educated guy, and I went to work for corporate America, and corporate America is great. Didn't work out for me. I was more of an outlier, wanted to do things my own way. The military taught me that it doesn't necessarily work that way. So it's building blocks, and I would have to say, for me, the stones of agony that I have walked on at times have been part of the trail to success. Yeah. And that's what most people are saying. This is a chance for us to look in the mirror and be really reflective and introspective and make some changes.
You're making me think about Craig Sawman Sawyer, who his episode came out last week, but he went from being a Navy SEAL in DevGru, SEAL Team 6, but awesome. Just in the military, that's as elite as you get. And that's not a knock on anybody else. There are other peer elite groups, but that's the elite amongst the elite on the elite team, so it's way out there. And that's an incredible career to have. But now what he works on is human trafficking and trying to find people like, the person who assaulted you sexually, and trying to put those people in jail and make that behavior so dangerous for that person that they can't do it anymore. And he absolutely says, like, the SEALs prepared me for this because I've got to go do really hard and ugly stuff, but I've got to do it within the confines of a legal system. I can't just go out there and kill people and beat them up and throw them into jail. I have to change the entire system, and I couldn't have done that without that experience of being on the SEALs. So you think about this. On the tip of the spear, there's the shiny part. At the very tip of the tip, that's him. And he's like, yeah, that was all in preparation. Those were those stones on the trail that I had to go through to be able to withstand the challenge of putting, sexual predators into prison. It's an incredible parallel,
Yeah, when you talk about pandemics, sexual assault, childhood sexual assault for boys and girls is pandemic. It's probably endemic. 1 out of 3 girls, that's the stat they give us. It may be higher before they're 18 has a story to tell. And 1 out of 5 boys before they're 18 has a story to tell. And, it's funny you mentioned Navy SEALs, because a good friend of ours that we both know, John McCaskill, who on the flip side, Navy SEAL guy, who's still active, retiring soon, he's working to educate people about mindful meditation.
Yeah.
To help them get through. So there's all these awesome missions out there. And that's what I think this whole thing is with this networking, is to educate others about, I think, my moniker on LinkedIn is advocate for humankind, education, healing, and commerce.
Yeah.
There's a way we can make it all work. It doesn't always have to be about making a buck. In fact, if you're just generated by making a buck, normally that business model can work for a short time, but it doesn't necessarily work for a long period of time. I think what really works in today's day and age, with so much information out there, is authenticity. And, we've heard that word, Pete, and everybody has a different definition of it. To me, authenticity is people that can be vulnerable and wear their heart on their sleeves, and not give a rat's rear end what other people think. And that's kind of, took me a long time to figure that out. I was always trying to live under the mold of somebody else. Not anymore, man.
Anymore.
I'm who I am, and it's time to move on and help other people.
I wanted to ask another question about your podcasts. I meant to do it earlier, but I don't want to lose track of this before we get too far away from it. I asked you, how you've changed from, through the podcast, because like these experiences, these one-on-one conversations are they're so emotionally charged and wonderful. What are some of the things you've peeled away from yourself? Not necessarily like ways you've gotten better, but how have you shucked off weight that you don't need anymore through the podcast? Who's allowed you to get rid of something you didn't need?
I would thank you for that question, Pete. I would say every single person that I've interviewed has helped me in some way. I think about Emily Yates, and she helped me peel back some stuff. She's in the Iraqi Veterans Against the War, and she's a musician, and she does some phenomenal stuff for veterans. And, that's the only show I've ever put a disclaimer on, because she had some really hardcore beliefs about the war in Iraq and what was going on. And I think you put the disclaimer in there for me.
Yeah.
And I learned even something from her. And most of all, I've learned that we're all entitled to have a place here. And nobody needs to tell us, we don't need anybody to tell us what we need to do to improve our lives. We have all the answers. And the people that I've interviewed, oh my gosh, these people, they found the answers, and they found what works for them. And I think most people, I think for me personally, it's okay to be me. It's okay to be John Krotec, and I don't have to put on airs, and I don't have to be anything that I'm not. And so often we go through life, when we have these interviews, we expose people. And my love for human beings is still the same. My love for America is still the same. I don't think those things will ever change. What has changed is my compassion, my belief in myself, that it's okay for me to feel and believe the way I do. There's a thing that I wrote in one of the poems called Walking Your Dogma. It's kind of a metaphor for, it's okay to have your beliefs, because the beliefs is what makes you, whether it's a spiritual belief or political belief or whatever, and keep it on a leash. Because the minute that your dogma or your belief starts biting somebody else, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And so if you are wholly dedicated to Christianity, if you're wholly dedicated to patriotism, do it in a way that doesn't infringe upon the rights of others. And that's what I've learned. It's okay to disagree with Emily Yates on her perception of the war in Iraq. But you know what? I still think she's a phenomenal human being. Yeah. And without the Emily Yateses of the world, there would be no mouthpiece for people that have the same opinion. So that's another thing. Everybody's got an opinion. And I always say this, my wife goes, "You're so gross." Everybody has an opinion. Some are just smellier than others. And she's like, "What's wrong with you?" But it's okay for people to have opinions. But when they start to infringe, just check it at the door.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other benefits that we get by getting outside of our personal, dogma, is, like I've talked to people, and I purposely do this. I often go left, right, left, right, left, right on a topic or guest list. I had Victor Davis Hanson, and then the next day put out, a Kennedy, a show featuring Rory Kennedy, the documentarian. That's right and left completely. And here's the thing is, I know I can take it because I put myself through it. I know you can take it because you can hear someone's critique and someone's opinion. You can have a conversation and it's reasoned, and there's room for that person's existence and room for that person to also be right about what they believe in. But if we deny ourselves that, if we don't allow those challenging conversations to happen where, look, if I'm right, then I can welcome rigorous debate, rigorous challenges to what I believe, because chances are in some way I'm going to reform my opinion ever so slightly and maybe drastically. But you can only do that if you put yourself in the position of having conversations that challenge what you believe, and also allowing someone else to be just as passionate, just as bent on good as you are. And I've learned that from my show. It's like, shut up, listen to what this person has to say, try to understand their point of view, and then ask them questions and challenge them, but be fair about it.
No, you're entirely correct on that, Pete. I look at it like this. Let's say I like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and you like the Oakland Raiders, and we just love arguing back and forth who's the best. We could come to fisticuffs over plays and which team is better. And in that fight, we lose sight that we both love American football. And that's what seems to happen on a lot of these issues. Mm-hmm. Most people, we have more in common than we have not in common.
Yeah. And
if we just took the time to take a deep breath, maybe pull our Dogma back on the leash or listen to their dog barking. If we just took the time, which is compassion, to listen to what they have to say, maybe there's a real opportunity to sway somebody, or maybe you might be swayed, or at least there's an understanding.
Yeah.
The minute we shut each other off, there's no room for engagement or understanding. And we see that right now in America with the polarization. It's brutal to watch, but I still believe, and I still have this faith in humankind, that most people in most situations will do the right thing. It's the 1% on the right, the ultra right. It's the 1% on the ultra left that keeps 98% of us fighting about stuff.
Right.
The power is with the people. We've heard that before. If we only believed in it, and if we only believed in ourselves and believed that other people have a right to be here.
Yeah, man, the power is within us. Let's get back into your book. I got us distracted for a little bit, but I think that was a good, worthwhile conversation. So creative writing from the time you were young, but poetry, and then if you're going to lay your soul bare, poetry is a good way to really expose yourself. It sounds terrifying. Let's talk about that.
Well, poetry, what happened to me, I was this inquisitive, happy-go-lucky third grader Cub Scout. And in a 90-second episode on a sleepover, it changed forever. Then I became a not so happy-go-lucky, mistrustful zombie. But I was able to hide it with my personality for over 4 decades. And the only way I could really have an outlet, of course, I told nobody. My own wife, who I was with for 30 years, never knew it until this came out. And then what was interesting when it came out and I came out, the number of men and women who private messaged me who told me of similar circumstances. So when you mention your SEAL buddy doing the things he's doing, that stuff is real. It happens to a lot of people, and it's not good. So I fantasized in movies of the day. You remember Billy Jack. You remember El Cid, Patton. I got lost in these movies to characters that were greater than people that were friends of underdogs or underdogs themselves and had virtues. And then as a methodology on a personal level, I just started to write short stories. I remember in the 5th grade, I used to tell stories, during recess. And I just started telling stories, and then I started telling poetry is as close as you can get to spilling your guts. And poetry, it's not the most popular section in the bookstore, but it's probably the most authentic, because most poets are just trying to come to grips with something that's inside that they're trying to put into words. It's not like writing a biography or even a self-help book. It's more your soul being laid bare. So my poetry is just different styles, different fragments, character poems. I tried to put myself in the shoes of other people. I tried to come to grips with what war and conflict and peace and love and romanticism and sexual assault and drinking and, all the things that were part of my life, just trying to make sense out of it all. Because when you're in the 3rd and 4th grade, you're not prepared for something like that. And if you're a parent and you're listening to this, keep an eye on your kids, because you can't look at the cover of my book and see the difference in that child's eyes and that child's demeanor.
Yeah.
I went from that to this, and nobody knew. And then, of course, as I got older and I started getting triggered, alcohol was a way to soothe my angry soul and to prove my manhood. I never had a problem. I would break a heart. Wow, isn't that tough?
Yeah.
Mr. Tough Guy, breaking somebody's heart. And so what that did is it made me feel worse, because the last thing I wanted to do was to break a young lady's heart. The minute something would get intimate as a young person, I would be gone. I made ghosts, if a ghost would be me, the picture in the dictionary. I would, anyhow. And then the alcohol would soothe that. And then I was always, a overachiever. I would always do 110% above and beyond the call of duty, and then always manage to find a way to sabotage it with overspending or drinking too much or doing something that just completely was against my grain, so I could prove to myself that I was unworthy.
Yeah.
Because when you're sexually assaulted, you feel unworthy, and it rocks your soul. It fractures your soul. You become something different. And I think not just sexual assault, but most traumas can do that to people. And so without writing the book, I'd still be me without the poetry, but the poetry helped me to get through it. And then to have the success I had really brought it all around. And I got to tell you, Pete, it's still hard for me to look in the mirror and say I'm a best-selling author. I don't think that I deserve it at times, and I'm working on that. And people might think, well, how, really? No, really. When your self-esteem has been rocked by something as tragic as a childhood sexual assault, it gets ingrained in your DNA. It becomes part of your genetic makeup, and it's tough to get through. It's still a fight every single day. Never goes away.
When you introduce yourself and someone says, "Hey, what do you do? What are you?" Do you say writer? Do you say poet?
No, I don't. And one of the ladies that helped me with the editing, phenomenal woman up in Maine, she said, how does it feel to be a poet? I went through your stuff and it's pretty good, John. She says, call yourself that, because that's what you are. And I, again, to me, I'm just a human trying to make sense out of all of this.
Sure.
And, call me what you want to call me, businessman, Army veteran, poet, book writer, speaker, whatever. I'm just Jon Krotec, and I only know how to be John. And I just thank God that things have worked out the way they have. And now I've got some skill sets and some beliefs that can help me get through the next hard thing in life, because life is not copacetic at times. We still have lots of things to go through, and I think I'm more prepared for it now.
I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile right now, and I'll put a link in here for it. It's pretty simple to get to. It's basically just type in Jon Krotec. There are not many Jon Krotecs out there. But what I see that, the advocate for humanity. I'd love to see the word poet in there, in that list of things that you are, because you got advocate for humankind, education, healing, commerce, founder, speaker, show host, international bestseller. I would love to see the word poet, because I think that is truly what you are. At your soul, to write poetry, to have it be good, to share it and have it actually sell, that's such a big hurdle, man. You should really be proud of that. You should really be proud of yourself. And if nothing else, I'm proud of you for doing that, taking that leap, making that plunge.
Well, thanks for that, Pete. We've been supporting each other for a while now, and this is no joke. Pete and I have had so many phone conversations over the last 3.5 years, just talking about everything. And you've been a very good friend, and you've helped me in so many ways. And, you don't get enough credit at times too. Your story was phenomenal having you on our show, and just the help that you've been able to give me behind the scenes means a lot, man. It really does. And I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I might do that, man. I might do that today. I might put forward.
I want to see it. That's as part of your launch team. I'm positive my advice to you was you should do it and not think twice about it. And, it's one of the things I've learned is that if you find fear, that's probably the place where you're going to grow the most by diving into that fear and attacking it, because, what the hell are you afraid of? No one's shooting at me today.
Yeah. My dog's just over here crying to get out, but,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll wrap this thing up. Hey, listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. Everybody should go check out. And if you look on if you're watching the video version of this, on the bottom of the page there, get Jon's book on Amazon. Use our link. That gives us a little taste of it. But Jon's book is excellent. I've had a chance to read some of the proofs and the poetry, and it's solid. And it, even if you're not sexually abused, and gosh, the numbers make that almost impossible now, but you will find value in this, especially if someone in your life has this. There's a lot of identity you can get from these poems where you can say, man, either understand if you haven't been through it, or if you have, you'll get some realization that you're not alone. You do have worth, and Jon's book really gives you that. So, man, thanks so much for writing it. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll just do this again soon.
Absolutely, Pete. I appreciate all that, and you have me on the show and support me over the last few years. And I just have a quote, polarization only works in sunglasses, not in sustainable communities. And, I'm always coming up with something, but I appreciate you. I appreciate your show, and I just want to tell you to keep going. And I look forward to where we can see each other in person someday.
I have a quote as well. Polarization is for polar bears.
There you go. Hey, that's a good one, man. Thanks, Pete.
I like it, brother. Take care.
I have to write that one down, man. Thank you.